Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a Watchman Newscast Livestream. Apologies, I'm a minute late here, not too much. Just kind of scrambling around getting this week's Watchman TV show together. Remember, we have the newscast on YouTube here every single day, but we also have the Watchman TV show on TBN every Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and Fridays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time as well. So scrambling to get this week's show together. And folks, it is a good one. It will air next week, actually. We're editing it this week. So that's how it works. We hit 1 week ahead usually, but busy man, but glad to be with you all. We have people from around the world joining us right now. This is exciting. Of course, I love it. Every continent people are with us. I like to say even our penguin friends in Antarctica, they're on their phones right now, and they're joining us for the live stream. So this is exciting, folks. We've already got a very lively chat going on here. I'm looking at the side of my screen here on my laptop, and I see the chat scrolling. Everyone's kind of talking and getting together. It's a lot of fun because, again, we do have people from around the world all coming together as watchmen and women on the wall on this channel for such a time as this. I assume if you're with us live that you are probably a subscriber. If not, hey, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted, a new live stream like today. We are posting every day, Monday through Saturday, sometimes even on Sunday, depending on the news cycle. So you don't want to miss anything here on the channel. Be sure to subscribe. Okay, let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. Russia. The Russian Defense Ministry announced today that the Russian military, the Russian Navy, has tested this month. They didn't give an exact date, but this month, January 2023, Russia says it has tested a hypersonic missile, a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile in the western half of the Atlantic Ocean. Translation: we conducted this nuclear-capable hypersonic missile test at America's doorstep. So that was the big news today for sure, to my mind, in the geopolitical realm worldwide, that Russia in the waters of the Atlantic testing these advanced hypersonic missiles. We're going to break down all the ramifications of that. Remember, China, Russia have definitely tested hypersonic missiles. North Korea and Iran say they also have conducted hypersonic missiles. I call those four nations the gathering storm nations, aligned against the West. Despite their differences in ideology, they share a common hostility towards the West. I call it, again, the gathering storm. So all four of those gathering storm nations claim to have tested hypersonic missiles. We know that Russia has them because they have actually used them on the battlefield in Ukraine. As for the United States, do they? For me, I'm an American citizen. I'm coming to you from the United States right now. I'd say, do we? Does our military have hypersonic missiles? Stay tuned. We are going to discuss that in a minute. And by the way, this hypersonic missile test comes as the United States and Germany are both reportedly set to supply battle tanks to Ukraine to be used against Russia. Folks, are we heading towards not just a regional confrontation in Europe between Ukraine and Russia? Is this pushing towards a massive global war, a prophetic war? What do you think? Because you know that Russia's not going to take too kindly to NATO nations now supplying Ukraine with tanks that will be used, obviously, to kill Russian soldiers on the battlefield. What will Russia's response be? And we get an indicator of Russia now pushing against NATO with this hypersonic missile test in the Atlantic Ocean, no less. So we're going to talk about that. A lot to unpack there. That Russia-Ukraine war, again, folks, it has ramifications far beyond just the Eastern European theater. We're going to break that down a bit, talk hypersonic missiles, why that could be such a game changer. Speaking of NATO, a question we get, or a comment we get on many of our live streams regards Turkey. People say, hey, you're talking so much about Iran, and for good reason, but what about Turkey, man? They're kind of lurking, and not lurking in the shadows. They're lurking in the background, though, and a formidable force. Number one, a NATO member nation. Number two, the second largest standing military in NATO behind the United States. Number three, obviously geographically located at a crucial place. Turkey geographically is really a crossroads between Europe and Asia. It straddles both continents. Number four, Turkey, obviously a very rich history going back to the Ottoman days. Not always the most pleasant history. That's an understatement, but a history nonetheless where the Ottomans, led by the Turks, once ruled a good chunk of the known world when you're talking North Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Europe. So Turkey's got that history. And the most dangerous part about this, and by the way, before 2002, for a roughly, I don't know, we'll say 80-year period, that history with the West was not a bad one. Turkey was very secular. After the caliphate, the Ottoman Caliphate, was disbanded in 1924, Turkey was very secular. Remember, and Turkey was aligned with the United States and with Israel closely and with NATO, and was really a bulwark against Soviet communism and Soviet expansionism. That all began to change, folks, in 2002 when Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the radical Turkish president, came to power. Now, he's looking at apparently a new election, quote unquote, this May. How much do you want to bet he's going to win? So Erdogan, looking at, nevertheless, they'll do the dog and pony show and hold elections, but clearly he's going to be the victor if he has anything to say about it. But since he came to power in 2002, Turkey has taken a radical turn, which brings me to the fifth point. I named 4 points a minute ago, why Turkey is such an important player. It is led right now by Erdogan, who is, shall we say, unstable, and also Muslim Brotherhood through and through in terms of his ideology. His Justice and Development Party in Turkey is essentially the Turkish branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Erdogan subscribes to that radical ideology, which is espoused by the Brotherhood, which is basically, look, folks, here's how it works. I've done a lot of reporting, a lot of work, a lot of research on the Brotherhood. I've interviewed Muslim Brotherhood leaders in Europe. I wrote a book about the Muslim Brotherhood called The Brotherhood back in 2013. You can still find it, Amazon.com, along with my other books. Working on my fourth book right now, just a little teaser for you. And much of it will be autobiographical. I hope to finish it by the end of this year, but stay tuned there. But anyway, a little tease there for you. But The Brotherhood, I wrote it in 2013, and it came out actually as Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood budding dictatorship under the Brotherhood was collapsing. The current Egyptian president Sisi overthrew Mohammed Morsi and that Muslim Brotherhood government. But let's bring it up to today. Erdogan subscribes to that Brotherhood ideology, which is basically, how do I describe it? From my interviews, from my research, I would say you have ISIS, Al-Qaeda, right? You know what they want. They want the caliphate now. The caliphate, basically that global Islamic state, every Islamic nation united into one super state, basically, led by one all-powerful leader known as the Caliph. He would lead the caliphate. That's what the Ottomans had under Turkish control for hundreds of years. The Brotherhood wants to bring that back. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they want it too. The violent wing, they want it too. But the tactics are different. They have the same end game. The Brotherhood, ISIS, same end game. The end game is the restoration of the Islamic Caliphate, that global superstate run by a caliph, ruled by a caliph, and Sharia law for one and all, whether you like it or not. So the end game is the same, but tactically they are much different. Here's how, and I'm getting to Erdogan here, bear with me. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, look, they're looking to kill you now, blow you up now. They're not very patient. In some ways, they are patient. It took years to plan 9/11. But in other ways, look, they're not going to put on, in their view, a charade and try to make nice with the West. They are very overtly anti-Western, and they are telling you, they're releasing videos, audio messages saying, we are going to kill you, we are going to destroy you. And they take the means to do that, obviously, military training, all the rest. When it comes to the Brotherhood, these guys are very slick. suits and ties, Western educated, eloquent, fluent English speakers many times, and they've been able to ingratiate themselves into very influential positions, not only in the Middle East, but right here in the West, whether it's academia, the media, and elsewhere. So they are kind of the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. That's their strategy. It's an incremental strategy, bit by bit. Again, the same end game, same goals as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the violent jihadis who are blowing things up. But the Brotherhood's going to do it through elections, through the system. Many times they will subvert a government. Look, Mohammed Morsi, who I mentioned a minute ago, who for a time was the president of Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood, he was elected in Egypt. In Tunisia, the Brotherhood was elected. Now, the Brotherhood has really taken a blow in those 10 years since Morsi was overthrown in Egypt. Egypt is the main power base of the Brotherhood, birthplace of the Brotherhood, always has been their main power base. But the Brotherhood is still strong in the West. And again, these guys in the West, these Brotherhood representatives, they don't call themselves the Brotherhood, number one. Number two, hey, suits, ties, you'd be fooled if you didn't know any better. You may very well be fooled if you didn't have the discernment from the Holy Spirit, number one. But number two, if you didn't know how they operate. What's the first rule of war? Sun Tzu, know your enemy. You got to know how the Brotherhood operates, and this is what they do. And another point, before we get to Erdogan's role in all this from Turkey, another point to remember is all of these violent jihadis, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whether it's Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, all these Al-Qaeda kingpins you can think of. Before they formed Al-Qaeda, they belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood. The same with ISIS leaders. I've called the Brotherhood the gateway drug to violent jihad. They're going to indoctrinate you. They're going to teach you the ways, brainwash you. Then they're going to send you off. That's how the Brotherhood operates. So this brings us to Recep Erdogan. Now, I said his party, the Justice and Development Party in Turkey, is essentially the Turkish branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. And look at Recep Erdogan. He wears a suit and tie. He leads a NATO member nation. And he's someone at world forums at the UN. He's an accepted member of the world community. That's how the Brotherhood operates. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, these guys are pariahs. They're demonic, pure evil. Everyone knows it. Even people with no moral compass, many of them sitting at the UN, criticize and condemn ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That's not how the Brotherhood operates. They're able to straddle both worlds. They're in that jihadi world, but in many cases, sadly, they gain acceptance in the halls of power, the corridors of power in the West as advisors and speakers at important events and things like this. So that's kind of the tack Erdogan has taken. He's very, very patient, slowly, incrementally, bit by bit. That's exactly what he did in Turkey, folks. Look at how Turkey has unraveled over the past 21 years since he came to power, since he was elected, I should say. He was formerly the mayor of Istanbul, Turkey. He was actually imprisoned for a time when Turkey was still secular because of radical Islamic comments he made about mosques and bayonets. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was pretty nasty stuff. I think he quoted from a poem. It was something wild when he was mayor of Istanbul, but it was a pro-violence kind of thing that he uttered. He was actually imprisoned for it by Turkish authorities at the time because although Turkey was secular for decades, and it's still officially secular, but under Erdogan, it's taken a very radical turn. Even during those secular days, the Turkish military fiercely tried to preserve that secular status quo. So any hint of like pro-jihad sentiment, radical Islamic sentiments, they cracked down right away. And they saw that Erdogan was trouble when it came to that. And lo and behold, he actually went on to win the presidency. And now he essentially, in many ways, rules Turkey with an iron fist. And again, I mentioned earlier, he's saying, well, elections in May. Yeah, free and fair, I'm sure. But, and I say that in jest, of course, but Erdogan has really, especially since 2016, July 2016, still a very murky situation where people are saying, look, was it a coup? Was it all engineered by Erdogan? He would tell you, look, there was a coup against me and I arrested all the plotters and threw them in prison. Some people would say he used this as a pretext to enforce a power grab and to eliminate his opponents. So with Erdogan, the bottom line is, and we'll get into his threats against Europe in a second. That's the crux of what we're going to talk about today, along with Russia. Very dangerous player on the world stage, almost like a mole within NATO, because it's still a NATO member nation. And folks, let me say also, I'm not talking about the Turkish people. I'm talking about this regime in Ankara right now, run by Recep Erdogan. The regime is a major problem, much like Iran, a major problem where the Turkish people, many are saying, wow, this is not good. And the Iranian people are in the streets right now telling you, showing you it's not good. They want to change. Same deal. These regimes get in power and they're going to put their boots on the necks of their own people. And we're seeing that in Turkey increasingly right now. Maybe the most unfriendly place for, say, press freedom in the world, too. Anyone critical, and by that I'm not talking, the kind of mainstream media that obviously, and rightfully so, many watching right now are not fans of. I'm talking more about folks that would actually criticize Erdogan, maybe a Turkish newspaper that would say, hey, we disagree with that policy. They run a risk of getting thrown in jail. And any Western journalist on Turkish soil run the same risk. And look, Christians, pastors on Turkish soil, a country that's 99% Islamic, by the way, and has the largest number of mosques, I think, per capita in the world. That's in Turkey. That's only increased under Erdogan. No surprise there. But think of Pastor Andrew Brunson, who we've had on the Watchman show, an American citizen, lived in and worked in Turkey for years, for decades, thrown in prison. He was finally released about 3 years ago when President Trump was still in office. If you remember, look, he was thrown unjustly in a Turkish prison for the crime of preaching the gospel. Amazing when he was released. It was such a God thing because Andrew Brunson came to the Oval Office, laid hands on President Trump, and prayed over him in the Oval Office. I mean, it's almost like God put him through that hell in Turkey, in a Turkish prison, separated from his wife and his family, to give him that moment. I've never seen anything like it. And if you haven't seen it, just do a search on the internet. Pastor Andrew Brunson prays in the Oval Office over the President of the United States at the time. It was amazing, folks. God, it's kind of like Joseph or the prophets, where God put him before princes and kings and presidents, prime ministers, that kind of thing. That's what happened with Andrew Brunson when he was released from prison. After that experience, he was with the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States, in the Oval Office, no less, with all the cameras all around the world on him. It was a massive story when he was released. Even the mainstream media had to cover it, the secular, ultra-secular mainstream media. And Andrew Brunson, with the eyes of the world fixated on him, all the cameras from all the media outlets worldwide fixed on him, prayed in Jesus' name in that Oval Office. Not only that, literally, again, laid hands on the President of the United States and just blessed that entire office, just being there and pray. It was amazing. So God put him through that. Who knows how many people were touched that day by what they saw from Andrew Brunson? Who knows how many people who are not followers of Jesus, people who perhaps are atheists, don't believe in God at all, were watching that day and said, wow, this guy who just went through hell in a Turkish prison, no less, he's now in the Oval Office, from the outhouse to the penthouse. He's in the Oval Office praying over the President of the United States, and he doesn't seem bitter about his experience. He's not mad at God. He's glorifying God and thanking God. Wow. How many people in that moment, in those minutes where Pastor Andrew Brunson was on TV, how many people were touched by that, maybe drew closer to God through that? So God used Pastor Brunson through that experience. It's really like a Joseph-type story, and he's still using today. Pastor Brunson's still an outspoken advocate for the church, for persecuted Christians, particularly in the Muslim world, so he's doing great work. But that's the kind of regime you have in Turkey right now, where a guy like Pastor Andrew Brunson, who's doing nothing wrong, who's been in the country for years, who's just preaching the gospel is thrown in prison for it. Folks, I don't know where you live in the world. If you live in the West, you have enjoyed religious freedom. And there are signs, not just signs, it's pretty clear that in Europe and the United States, the ultra-secular woke movement is coming for Christianity. And Christianity is more and more under the microscope, being criticized, Christians being singled out for their beliefs, for traditional common sense biblical beliefs. And yet, we still have freedom of religion. Here where I'm sitting in the United States and in Europe. Again, there are many who would love to take that away. And things are getting antsy, let's say that. But compare that to a place like Turkey, to a place like Iran, China, Cuba, other places in the world where followers of Jesus have to go underground, quite literally, to worship the Savior. Unbelievable. Here in the West, where I'm sitting right now, and again, we have viewers from around the world who could probably speak to this. And thank you for the reminder there. We do have Q&A today for the last 15 minutes or so of this live stream. So send your questions now. I'll be combing through them. Let me know what you think of all this. But for all the problems here in the West, and there are many, and they're getting worse, I can still go to church on Sunday, and the church of my choosing, and freely worship the Creator. So I look at what's happening in places like Turkey and Iran, and I thank God. Not only thank God for the freedom to worship him freely, but I thank God for those believers in those countries and for people like Pastor Andrew Brunson working in those countries. I thank God for them, for their courage, for their boldness. I pray for them every single day. I do everything I can to highlight the plight of the persecuted church around the world. I'm just calling on the thousands of people who are watching this right now to join me in that, praying for the persecuted church. Most of the worst offenders are in the Middle East, in the Muslim world, but North Korea is number one. China right at the top too. Then you have countries like Yemen, like Iran. Really no surprise here, right? So keep these believers. If you're in the West like me, praise God for the freedom you still do have. And I know there's an attempt to take our freedoms away, but for the freedom you do have now, where you're still able to work in the light, that door may eventually close. Certainly there's evil forces who want to close it. But in the West right now, we can still work and worship in the light. But the door has been closed for a long time in many nations in the world. And pray for them. Thank them. Thank God for these people, these brave brothers and sisters in Christ who are keeping the flame alive against all odds, against relentless persecution. Folks, no matter how badly they are persecuted, you cannot stop the gospel. No demonic evil force can completely stamp out the gospel. It's been tried many times by many tyrants, and it will never happen, because in the end, Christ is victorious, and he will always have his ambassadors in every nation in the world working on his behalf. So that's what we have right now. Again, I just felt prompted to share that about the persecuted church, because I want you to know that many times, many of us, we don't think about it. Hey, in the United States, we've got big old mega churches with coffee shops inside and bookstores. Hey, that's great. That's great. The more people coming to the Lord, if it's solid biblical teaching in those churches, the more people coming, having a great experience in Jesus' name, the better. But man, do we have it good. And to whom much is given, much is required. I think in the very least, what's required is of us as believers, if you live in a free country. And again, we have folks from all over the world who may not live in a free country or watching right now. If you do live in a free country, what is required? I think in the very least, your fervent prayers for the persecuted church. So there you go. And Turkey is one of the culprits. Sadly, Turkey, the Turkish government is one of the culprits there. Hey, lastly, we want to get into the Temple Mount. Oh my gosh, the Temple Mount again. Yeah, we've got news there. Folks, I told you, don't be surprised if we mention the Mount on every newscast live stream for at least a few quick minutes, because as I've told you, and as the Bible more importantly tells you, much more important, that's where I get it from. The Bible's very clear that Jerusalem more and more in these last days is going to become the focus of the world's obsession and attention. Jerusalem is geographically the center of the world. The Temple Mount is the center of that center. And it's at the center of God's prophetic time clock, his prophetic plan, the city of Jerusalem, his city. He says so. It's a city where he's written his name. So don't be surprised if you hear a lot about the Temple Mount, most coveted piece of real estate in the world in the days to come. We have news on that front, and I reported on this on yesterday's newscast. If you missed it, remember, check it out here on the channel. Go to our homepage right under newscast. You will find it in the archives. It was yesterday, January 24th. We posted about this. Hey, another reminder, subscribe to the channel, of course, but we are available, folks, across every social media platform, including Instagram. Erick.Stakelbeck. That's ERICK.STAKELBECK. Erick.Stakelbeck at Instagram. We're really going to be doing a lot of cool stuff at Instagram, including videos that you won't see anywhere else in the days to come. So you want to follow us on Instagram now. A heads up there, we're going to do some Instagram lives in the coming weeks. We've got some big plans there for 2023. And hey, when you're in the most probably photogenic cities and the most photogenic epic country in the world, Israel, on a regular basis, you got to post those photos, right? So check us out there, Erick.Stakelbeck. We're also on Twitter, at Erick Stakelbeck, and Facebook as well. You can find us at all those platforms. And when I spelled out that name, it's funny, my last name, even my first name trips people up because it's E-R-I-C-K. It's not Erick E-R-I-C, it's E-R-I-C-K. My last name, Stakelbeck, good luck. But you can see why everyone, and I mean everyone, growing up in Philly called me Stax. Stax was my nickname, and it has stuck with me. I'm now an old man, and my buddies who I grew up with and beyond, my people I've met through work and dear friends, brothers in Christ, let's just call them Stax. It's the easiest thing to call them. So that's really been my nickname for my whole life, Stax, short for Stakelbeck, obviously. I've also gotten E and Big E. I'm a big guy, 6'5". So I've gotten Big E a lot as well, and a basketball player too, so that kind of fit in. But anyway, as I spelled the name out, I said, man, I feel sorry for our viewers. But you can rewind and listen to the spelling again, Erick.Stakelbeck at Instagram and at Erick Stakelbeck at Twitter. But let's get some questions coming. Wow, this is going fast. We've got questions coming. Temple Mount, Bibi, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that quick update I wanted to give you, met with King Abdullah of Jordan yesterday. A surprise visit to Amman. Again, that was on yesterday's newscast. Check it out in the archives. Surprise visit to Amman, his first visit to Amman since 2018 to meet with the king. And the main order of business was the Temple Mount. Obviously, Jordan has been protesting loudly that this new Israeli government led by Netanyahu is looking to change the so-called status quo on the Temple Mount, meaning the status quo right now, the state of things, is that Jews cannot pray, or Christians cannot pray openly atop the Temple Mount. If they do, they are either escorted off the mount or thrown in jail. That's the status quo, so-called, atop the Temple Mount right now. You might say, well, why is that problematic? Well, number one, Muslims can worship freely on the Temple Mount openly. We've shared footage here in the newscast of large Muslim prayers on Fridays spilling out of the Al-Aqsa Mosque there. Number two, Jordan is the custodian. They oversee the Temple Mount. They have since 1967. Today, the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, are located atop the Temple Mount. During the times of the Bible, Solomon's temple, the first temple, and then the second temple, which Jesus taught in, which he chased the money changers out of, they were located atop the Temple Mount. Yes, on the Temple Mount, not in the city of David below. The temples were on the Temple Mount. Sometimes we get comments talking about that. and I guess people try to play it up as a debate. Where were the temples on the Temple Mount? We've dug into that before, but I digress. It's not a salvation issue, by the way. If you want to disagree with it, fine, no problem. Not a salvation issue, but just to put that to rest, hopefully. But Jordanian control all over that area, but Jews are saying, hey, wait a minute. We prayed there 3,000 years ago, and now we can't pray on the Temple Mount? That's not right. We need to change the status quo. Some members of Bibi's government are saying that. Bibi is saying no, and reportedly he delivered this message yesterday to King Abdullah. No, we're not going to change the status quo. But again, members of his government are saying, yes, we want to change the status quo. Bottom line, stay tuned. I had to give you that update. And the other update to that is Itamar Ben Gvir, one of the most openly pro-change the status quo members of Bibi's government. He ascended the Temple Mount about 3 weeks ago. All he did was walk around. He didn't pray. He walked around and he left, but that was enough to cause an international uproar where Israel was condemned at the UN over it, which is madness. But Ben Gvir said today in the wake of that Bibi Abdullah meeting, look, I don't care what they say. I'm going to continue to ascend the Temple Mount. Stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned. Okay, before we get into questions, and by the way, I didn't mean to offend anyone with the Temple Mount. The temples were on the Temple Mount, because I know some people feel very strongly that the temples, the first and second temple, were below the Temple Mount, down in the valley in the city of David. The city of David, a place, it's my second home when I'm in Jerusalem. I'm there all the time with the folks at the city of David. And there's a debate about that nowhere, and I mean nowhere, other than on the internet in the United States, it seems, because every Israeli archaeologist and even the folks at the city of David, it's as has been written even by Arab sources in the 20th century, the location of the Temple Mount or the temples is beyond dispute. Even Arab sources have written that, but we can debate all day long and go in circles with it. But I just want to bring it up because I didn't mean to come off as flip when I said that. So I apologize if I did come off a bit flip there. But I'm in Jerusalem all the time. I'm on the Temple Mount all the time. It just seems so obvious to me. That's where the temples were. But all good. We can all have our own opinions. And that's why, hey, like we said earlier, it's a free country, right? So God bless everybody. It's not a salvation issue. We can agree to disagree. But those hypersonic missiles, we mentioned earlier at the top, Russia. Here's the state of play with hypersonic missiles. I don't doubt that Russia tested hypersonic missiles in the Atlantic Ocean. And I've got some, we can just straight from the source here. I want to just pull up my phone here. Some articles here I pulled up with some more details on this. Then a little more Turkey threats news I really think you're going to find interesting. Turkey threatening Greece. I mean, serious threats, folks. Another NATO member nation. You're going to want to stay with us for this. But here's the details. The Russian Defense Ministry said one of its frigates had conducted hypersonic missile exercises in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean, maybe not too far from the good old Jersey Shore where I vacation every summer. I don't know. Russia announced the development of the hypersonic missiles back in 2019. Vladimir Putin said then that the missiles have a top speed of Mach 9, or 9 times the speed of sound, and a range of 620 miles. Now, in this test, this Russian ship apparently fired a hypersonic missile at a target hundreds of miles away. The Russians say they successfully struck it. So that's troubling. And a hypersonic missile, Putin said 9 times the speed of sound. It also flies at a very low altitude. It's harder to detect, harder to shoot down. And again, a hypersonic missile can be equipped with a nuclear warhead. Do I have your attention? Now, Russia has them. They've used them, not nuclear equipped, but they have used hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles in the battlefield in Ukraine, as I mentioned earlier. China has tested them. North Korea says it has tested them and tested them. And I wouldn't doubt it. And North Korea is a nuclear power. I wouldn't doubt that their people will starve, but they'll put 99.9% of their complete budget into their nuclear and missile programs. That's how that wicked, demonic regime operates. Iran recently said that it tested a hypersonic missile. I don't know about that, but Iran certainly has cozy relationships with Russia, China, and North Korea. So nothing is beyond the realm of possibility. But the situation we have with the United States, and I'm speaking now as an American, is that the United States is working apparently diligently on hypersonic missiles, has not kind of debuted them yet, I guess you would say, to the world. But I would say, and you think of the space race back in the 50s and 60s, this is obviously much different. These are lethal weapons. But I would say that the United States really should start to not rush anything out there, obviously, or do anything rash or silly. But Russia and China are flexing their muscles, folks. A hypersonic missile test in the Atlantic Ocean, a bit of a provocation, right? And I know people watching are saying, provocation? What about the United States and Germany giving tanks to Ukraine to be used against Russia? I know. We'll get to it in a minute. Then you have Iran. We reported last week, Iran sending warships to the Panama Canal by the end of this year. China, obviously, their activities around the world. What I'm saying is the bad guys, the gathering storm nations, are flexing their muscles in a major way. And I think it's good from time to time for the United States to say, hey, we're still here too, and we're keeping up with all the latest military advances as China builds up its nuclear arsenal, its navy to unprecedented heights. Since nothing like it seems really since World War II, China's military and nuclear buildup, its naval buildup. Sometimes it's good for the United States to remind nations like that, competitors who have nefarious aims, that hey, we're still here. So that's the hypersonic missile situation. I mentioned a few minutes, we're getting the questions. Keep them coming. A lot of questions. There's little pings you hear, are questions coming in, so keep them coming. Germany and the United States supplying tanks to Ukraine. Folks, it looks like it's going to happen. Germany will, I think it's called the Leopard T2 tank. It's a battle tank. Over a dozen, at least 14, I was reading out of German media reports today, that they are going to ship to Ukraine. And the U.S., the Biden administration, is talking about sending some 30 M1 Abrams battle tanks to Ukraine. Folks, already Russia called it a massive, blatant provocation. I'm quoting one of the Russian spokesmen who was quoted talking about this. So things are escalating. You have the West pushing. You have Russia pushing hypersonic missile tests in the Atlantic Ocean, and it feels more and more like a collision course. Where have I used that term before? Where I'm talking Iran and Israel in Syria, certainly a collision course. Are the West and Russia increasingly on a collision course? We talked about it earlier. Last week, I should say, Dmitry Medvedev, a very close ally of Vladimir Putin. He's the former Russian president. And Medvedev said, if we were to lose in Ukraine, it may lead to a nuclear war. If we were to lose a conventional war in Ukraine, he said a nuclear power has never lost a conventional war. Well, you think of Russia in Afghanistan, you think of the United States in Vietnam. They were losses, certainly, in that the goals were not accomplished, and the U.S., Russia pulled out eventually. The Soviets pulled out of Afghanistan, the U.S. pulled out of Vietnam without accomplishing their aims. So certainly a defeat in many ways. But I think what Medvedev is talking about is a clear-cut, conventional mano-a-mano defeat, where Ukraine is crossing the border and occupying Russian cities. I think that's what Medvedev is talking about. Not what we saw in Vietnam and Afghanistan, but he's talking about a more outright victory where Russia's on the run from its Western neighbor. Then he's saying we'd resort to nuclear weapons. Either way, it's troubling, to say the least, and this thing is heating up. And my sense is, and I've talked about this many times on the newscast, my sense is that Western leaders should take these statements seriously, that it's not a bluff, especially when it comes from Putin himself. Look, this is a guy who's, I believe, 70 or 71, rampant rumors that he has cancer, and things are not going well for him in Ukraine. Clearly, reportedly, we've had some 100 100,000 Russian troops killed in the past 11 months since Russia invaded. Probably many more Ukrainians killed than that, clearly. Things haven't gone well. So he's getting up there in years. He's not in good health. He may be increasingly unpopular among his inner circle. So a guy in such a potentially precarious position like Putin, do you really think he's going to just suffer a defeat in Ukraine? What I'm saying is this. He knows he likely won't survive that. He's not going to survive it. It's already been a disaster in many ways. If it's just an outright defeat where Ukraine's pressing, and Russia's just done, he won't survive that, and he knows it. So if a guy like that in that kind of situation is backed up against the wall, don't you think he may resort to drastic measures? So I'm just laying it out there. It's not trying to scare you. It's reality. Is it beyond the realm of possibility that he would use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine? They've threatened it repeatedly, and I don't think it is. And maybe I'm the crazy one, or maybe I'm the one who's actually, look, if the 20th century told us anything, it's that when evil men tell you they want to kill you, you should believe them and take them at their word. So when leaders around the world make comments like this, I take them at their word. I take it very seriously. I don't consider it a bluff, especially when Russia has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. So I'd like to hear your comments on that as well, too. We have to get to our questions in a minute. And we didn't even mention the word prophecy in all this. Where is this prophetically? You know where I think this is going prophetically with Russia. Russia eventually will come down to the Middle East in the war of Gog and Magog. I don't know if Vladimir Putin will even be the leader then. There may be another leader after him who leads that invasion force or who orders it. Where the Ukraine war is going, I would think that Russia eventually is going to just wear Ukraine down, just with overwhelming force. And you have to think that this year there's a major Russian offensive coming, maybe in the spring, early spring, late winter, probably early spring. So it's going to be a very eventful year. I think a year of decision, a year of reckoning in Ukraine, where we're going to know one way or the other where that's going. So things will get worse, I believe, than better, at least in the near term there. So keep that whole situation in your prayers, folks, no doubt. Last thing I got to mention before we get to Q&A, we're talking Turkey. Let's see here. Excuse me, as I pull up this article, I want to quote directly from it because I thought that you would like to hear this directly. Here we go. From my friend Michael Rubin. He asks, did Turkey just threaten war on Greece? By the way, when we're talking Turkey, we're talking Russia, we're talking war of Gog and Magog. I believe Turkey, along with Iran, will be side by side with Russia. So all of these moves and these chess pieces moving on the board are prophetic chess pieces. Everything we're talking about today, folks, has prophetic implications. Did Turkey just threaten war on Greece? Listen to this. Speaking at a rally in Istanbul on Friday, Turkish President Recep Erdogan threatened military action against Greece. Look, he said to Greece's, what's wrong with me today? I apologize. Greece's prime minister, keep in mind that this Erdogan's words, keep in mind that the crazy Turks will come if you attempt to make a mistake. Wow. Not only that, and he's talking about there's a dispute over islands. Turkey wants them, Greece has them. But last month, listen to what Erdogan said. December 27th, Erdogan has lashed out at Greece over these islands, this dispute there, and he threatened missile strikes against Greece and said, we have missiles and we will use them against another NATO member. Now, folks, a NATO member has never gone to war against another NATO member for obvious reasons. It's an alliance. So Turkey, which under Erdogan's radical rule, I call Turkey NATO in name only. He's basically a mole within the alliance now. Turkey's threatening another NATO member. And folks, there's quite a history between Greece and Turkey. Istanbul was once called Constantinople, the capital of the Greek Byzantine Empire, before it was conquered by the Turkey-led Ottoman Empire. So there's this history there dating back hundreds and hundreds of, over hundreds of years, over 1,000 years. So a checkered past there, a lot of hostility still. And there you have it. Erdogan, and I don't, is he facing any ramifications, any repercussions for this from other NATO member nations? He's threatening another NATO member nation. Where are the repercussions? There are none. We're talking about Europe right now, right? And when we're talking about Europe in 2023, we're talking about appeasement and weakness, quite frankly, and moral relativism, nowhere more clear than in its dealings with the Iranian regime. But that's the state of play right now with Turkey, and that's what's going on. And Erdogan also says that he is going to block Swedish membership in NATO. Sweden and Finland have been looking to join NATO. These are two countries that are obviously in very close geographic proximity to Russia. Finland shares a long border with Russia. They're feeling a bit uneasy since the invasion of Ukraine, and they're saying, hey, can we get into NATO and have some backup here and have some allies? Erdogan is looking to block that. Remember, to join NATO, every NATO member nation must approve. Everyone must say, you can't have any nays. It must all be yays. And Erdogan is saying, I'm going to be a nay when it comes to Sweden and Finland. Number one, because I want to make Putin happy, my ally Vladimir. And number two, because he says there are anti-Turkish Kurdish rebels, essentially, living in Sweden and Finland. And Erdogan says, if you want to be a member of NATO, you need to crack down on them. Well, guess what? Things were looking pretty good for a while there. And then this past weekend, Kurdish demonstrators in front of the Turkish embassy in Stockholm reportedly were chanting anti-Erdogan slogans and burnt a Quran. Someone apparently burned a Quran there as well, and that inflamed Erdogan. And now he's saying, you know what, Sweden, you're done. Because, again, it happened in Stockholm, right in front of the Turkish embassy there. Now Erdogan's saying, Sweden, you're out. So he's become, between Greece, Sweden, Finland, folks, he is an unpredictable character, to say the least. And I know people who've been in the room with him in the past, and they have said as much. Wow. Fasten your seatbelts, right, for 2023. A lot going on here. Hey, one last mention. Remember, subscribe to the news channel here. Let's get the questions. I'm going to pull them up right now. Not only do I implore you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel here, but also, as I pull up our questions, 1 second, folks. Thank you for your patience. Here we go. I think I got them. Also, check us out. Again, I mentioned earlier on Instagram. We're really going to be doing some cool stuff there this year. Erick, Erick .Stakelbeck, Stakelbeck, Erick.Stakelbeck at Instagram. We're going to build that up. You're going to see some stuff that you like there. Video content, pictures from the Middle East and beyond. Follow us there. Good stuff coming. And, of course, Twitter and Facebook as well. Okay. Questions. Whoa, we've got a bunch, and they're all good. Love our Watchmen viewers, man. We have, like, the sharpest viewers in the world. I'll put our viewers up against any other channel. I really will. With your questions, your insights, your knowledge, the Watchmen and women on the wall. Pardon me, I'm just looking at your questions. Okay. Well, I think I just laid this out. Sokay Publishing asks, do you believe that Erdogan will have a major role in the end times? I think he's got a role in the war of Gog and Magog, no doubt. I think Turkey at least does. Will Erdogan be the leader? Unclear. Maybe he won't be leading Turkey when that happens. Maybe Vladimir Putin won't be leading Russia. It's unclear who the leaders are, but in my view, it's pretty clear who the nations are. So Erdogan could be a player in that for sure. Here's a question for all you prophecy buffs. And again, it's not a salvation issue if anyone disagrees, just like the Temple Mount issue. Do you believe the war of Gog and Magog is before the 7-year tribulation period or during the 7-year tribulation period? That's a question for you there. And that might give you an indicator when you're talking end times, where Erdogan is at in that. So let us know what you think there. Okay. Here we go. Do you think now that Germany, Basil Khoury, I apologize, there's a lot of questions I'm going through here. Thanks for your patience. Do you think now that Germany and other countries are sending tanks, could that spark Russia to use nukes? Well, Basil, good question. And we were just talking about that, right? Would Russia just preemptively, because of the delivery of tanks, use nuclear weapons? I don't think so. I think Russia would, I don't think they wouldn't use them. I'll say that. But I think it would take more for Russia to go there to the point where they're using nuclear weapons. And it could go there. I don't discount that possibility. I pray that's not the case. But I don't think this proxy war that's happening right now with the West supplying Ukraine with tanks against Russia, I don't think that's enough to make Russia go the nuclear route. I think it would be, if Russia's backs were really against the wall, heavy battlefield losses, if these tanks perhaps help turn the tide in Ukraine's favor in a major way, then anything's on the table, I would say. Let's see. Beth B asks, are you headed to the End Times Summit in July, Eric? I didn't even hear about it, Beth. I'm not sure. I'm on vacation for some of July. Let's see. On the beach, on the exotic white sands of the Jersey Shore. I say that with a chuckle. My beloved Jersey Shore. Let's see. They're not white sands, but it's my beach. Hey, it has been my whole life. I'm a Philly boy. That'll never change. Let's see. Question from CK. Where is the UN on the recent attacks on the American military? Now, CK, what I think you're talking about is this. We reported on this on the newscast last Friday, this drone attack where Iran itself, or Iranian-backed groups, sent 3 drones, attack drones, against a U.S. base in Syria. No one was killed, thankfully, but again, it shows you Iran pushing. Where's the UN on that? Nowhere, CK. I haven't heard anything from the UN about that. Nor have I heard anything from the UN on any Iranian-backed attacks against American forces in Iraq and Syria. I don't think you expected anything different. We're talking about the UN here. Question. Let's see. Let's see what we have. Keep them coming. We got a few minutes left here. Good question from Rob C. With all that has transpired between Russia and Ukraine, do you think China looks at that when pondering a possible invasion into Taiwan? Yes, I do very much, Rob. I think that China has been monitoring what's going on between Russia and Ukraine very closely over the months. I think, number one, China has been looking to see, okay, what is the level of Ukraine's resistance? Obviously, it's been very strong, and with Western backing as well. Would Taiwan resist in a similar fashion? And clearly, Taiwan would also have Western backing. So China's watching that. I think, secondly, China's been watching the world's response, meaning the economic ramifications for Russia. Now, in many ways, Russia has become a pariah state because of this, but the Russian the Russian economy, it's taken a blow, but the country hasn't collapsed. It's still up and running because Russia has friends, whether it's China, whether it's Iran, whether it's Belarus, Venezuela. Russia does still have, India still does business with Russia. So China has seen that Russia has weathered the storm in that regard. Those are the 2 main things I think it's watching. The response of the Ukrainian people and the world's response and how Russia has weathered the storm. I think China is also probably looking at the Russian campaign and saying, okay, this is what we should not do when it comes to Taiwan. They're looking probably more closely, not at the successes of Russia, but the mistakes that Russia has made and saying, okay, we're not going to do that. Let's avoid that. Obviously, completely different. Ukraine, a landlocked country, neighbors Russia. Taiwan's an island, so completely different. But China's watching. Let's just say that, watching everything about this. And again, I've said that under weak American leadership, and clearly we have that in Washington, D.C. right now under Joe Biden, China perhaps in the past was saying, okay, you know what? we have a plan to invade Taiwan in 2026 or 2027. If you're China right now, you're looking at the complete weakness in Washington, D.C., and you're saying, wow, you know what? I know we said 2027, but if this guy is in office, maybe he's out of office in 2024. We have a window here between now and November 2024, the next U.S. election. Maybe we should capitalize and move now, especially when the world's attention is distracted by Russia and Ukraine. Is that crazy thinking? I don't know. Even Secretary of State Antony Blinken, a member of this Biden administration, said as much a few months ago that maybe China, now that things are going on in Russia and there's a lot of chaos in the world, maybe China's thinking, hey, maybe now is a good time to move against Taiwan. Folks, I hope that's not the case. But again, in today's world, expect the unexpected. Let's see what else we have. Good question from Randall Mitchell. Do you think Turkey will use Sweden and Finland and that whole issue, them trying to join NATO, as an excuse to part from NATO? That's the big question, right? Wither Turkey. What does Erdogan do? Because there are obvious benefits for him being a member of NATO, clearly. Being a member of that military alliance, and again, being kind of a mole inside the West. It's a Western alliance, and he's not a Western-minded guy, clearly, yet he's a part of that alliance, and he's privy to what NATO member nations are doing, intelligence, military, all the rest. So he's a guy who I see as hostile to NATO and hostile to the West and hostile to Judeo-Christian civilization, and yet he's a member of this alliance. He didn't sign up for this alliance. Turkish leaders did decades ago, yet he's kept this alliance. That would second largest standing army in NATO behind the United States, as I mentioned earlier, that would send shockwaves if he was to depart. Not to me, in that I'd say, I knew this day was coming, in that it confirms what we all knew. Recep Erdogan is a radical Islamist in the Muslim Brotherhood mold, and he has much more in common with the Iranian regime than he does with NATO. It's pretty clear in his aims, his goals. This is a guy who proudly has hosted Hamas in Turkey. It goes on and on. Very anti-Israel. It goes on and on. So on one hand, it wouldn't surprise me, but the shock waves would reverberate throughout the world, no doubt. But how does he make that break? I'm not privy. I don't have it in front of me right now, all of the ins and outs of the NATO alliance. And if a member nation wants to leave, are there consequences? I don't know. I don't have the NATO bylaws in front of me right now. But you would think there's probably you can't just join it and then just leave with no repercussions. I would think diplomatic, at least repercussions, economic. I'm not sure. But number one, Rob, I don't know how easy it is, or Randall, I'm sorry. I don't know how easy it is for him to leave NATO, for Turkey to pull out. I don't know. But now I'm going to look at the bylaws because I'm intrigued. I do know if you want to join NATO, every NATO member has to approve, every last one. That's why Sweden and Finland have struggled, because Erdogan has opposed them joining. I think in his heart, he would love to leave NATO. In his heart, he would love to just completely cut off Israel. Remember, he's had this rapprochement with Israel over the past few months, where he's putting on a charm offensive now because his economy is struggling badly. Inflation is through the roof in Turkey. In his heart of hearts, he would love to cut all ties with Israel and NATO. But for now, and again, he's a patient guy playing the long game. For now, he will keep those alliances. And if he did something very drastic, and we got these threats against Greece, could NATO kick Turkey out? Again, I got to look at the bylaws, and you guys can check them out too. I'm not quite sure all the ins and outs of that alliance. Some things I know: if one member's attacked, all members go to war alongside it. We know that. That's the basics. But in terms of leaving NATO or getting kicked out of NATO, that's something I'm going to check out too, because I find that very interesting. And that's a conversation we may be having if Erdogan keeps up with Greece, a NATO member nation, in the months to come. This was good, folks. Great questions. Someone asked about my Kelly Green Philadelphia Eagles hoodie. You know I'm rooting for. I'm a Philly boy through and through. He asked Crisco Duck, a fellow Philly native who's commenting, are you going to the game? Nah, I'm not going to the game, but I think the Eagles are going to win. So I wish I was going to the game. I'll be watching it, though, but I think the Eagles look pretty good. Now, I know we have people around the world who are saying, who are the Eagles? We have people in like Asia who don't even know what the NFL is probably, or the Philadelphia Eagles. It's okay. We love you guys anyway. But it's American football, not the World Cup kind of football. That's what we have here in the States. Hey, great being with you all today. God bless you until tomorrow. Thanks again for joining us. And remember, never hold your peace. Take care.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.